so that you can see the process that led to the glider. First of all, I'm an Australian. I was born in the Sydney suburbs in 1934. I grew up in a small seaside village called Harbord. It's just recently had its name changed to Freshwater, and all the price of houses went up. I had wonderful parents and had a huckleberry fin existence. Around about 5 years of age, I used to be taken by my father down to the rocks along the seashore, and while he fished, I would play among the small cliffs that were there and watch seagulls soaring. I wanted to fly. Everybody here will understand exactly what that means, and the seagulls were my inspiration. A little later along came the war, and another further lift of inspiration was particularly for British people, and we are at that time considered ourselves more British than Australians, was a submarine Spitfire designed by Mitchell, and I wanted to be a Spitfire pilot. From time I learned to write, which was around 5 years of age in an Australian school, and read, I studied flying machines, and in no small way it was an absolute obsession. By the time I was 7 or 8, I was building model aircraft. Initially, when I was 6 or 7, I was making solid models. Then I started building flying models, primarily to start with chuck gliders. As time went on, and I mean, I didn't read in any small way. I was into structures. I was into things like the fatigue of metal, flutters, resonance in flutters, vortex shedding. As time went on, I used to make models from kits and also from plans that you could get from hobby shops. By the time I was 9 or 10, I was designing my own model sailplanes. I was also building kites. My father taught me to build kites. I had a handy turn of what would you call it? I was handy and could build things, and it had a bit to do, I think, with the era. My father wound up in Darwin in 1941 when I was 7 years of age, and he was there when Darwin was attacked, as was Pearl Harbor. There were more bombs dropped on Darwin than there were on Pearl Harbor in a sneak attack, exactly the same as Pearl Harbor had, and he was on the ACAC guns. And he was there for the duration of the war, and they were bombed constantly right through that period. So from 1941 or 1941-42, we boys and I guess girls in Australia were on our own. There were no toys. We had to make our own. We made our own cricket bats, which was sort of the equivalent of your baseball bat. We made our own stumps. We made our own billy carts. For example, we would make canoes out of corrugated iron, which was used constantly for roofs in Australia, and we'd get these and we'd bash them flat with the backs of axes or some other device, either a chunk of wood, and we'd make them flat. We'd fold them up like that, we'd put a piece of wood each end, and we'd nail it on one side, and then bring it around and bend the tin around it. Really crude, and then steel tar off the road and melt it into each end of the canoe, and we'd take it down and paddle it, like so. My first attempt, I put it in, hopped into off the end of a little G, hopped into it, the canoe closed up and took me straight to the bottom. So these are the things that happen. And I, of course, then retrieved the canoe and we put a stick in there, and I spent many happy hours paddling around North Curl, a little lake there. So these are the sort of place that we grew up. We also did some pretty dangerous things. We found we used to make our own bungers, or if we could get a cracker from somewhere, we could put a wire up a piece of pipe off a bicycle pump in the bottom end, bring the cracker down, put a marble in it, and you lift the thing, and boom! And you get fired this 100 feet. Pretty, the marble this size. So, these were the things we did. And of course the billy carts, which were made, we'd get the local garage and we'd get ball races and put on the end of sticks. And I know the Americans did roughly the same thing, and down the hill we'd go, no brakes. So we repaired our own bicycles for the kids that had bikes. Later on, when the war was over, we actually made our own diving masks and swim flippers. We did that at home. So I had built in a very considerable ability to make and build things. Overriding all of that was a tremendous passion and wish to fly. So I moved into teenage years, and my level of study went up and up as I moved through high school. I knew things about fatiguing metal, about rivets and screws and structures, and I always had a passion for minimum structure, because anyone that's built a model glider, a bit like a shindig glider, all these ribs, and you get it out there and you haul it into the air and finish. There's sort of laziness in me to put minimum structures. So that's where we were, and I did a training in electronics, which gave me a certain level of mathematical training. I did postgraduate study after initial electronics certificate with television. I did 6 months with the Royal Australian Air Force as a conscriptee. We had national service, and I think at one time you guys used to have that. It was compulsory, and I did 6 months doing an 18 months course in electronics. So around about that time, I met a lovely young lady, and we were married and had a couple of kids, and I still wanted to fly. The minimum structure aircraft that was around at that time was the Benson gyroplane, which was actually derived from a German autogyro that they used to launch off submarines. And Benson made these things, sold plans. I bought some, didn't like what I saw, so I designed my own rotor blades, built the glider, modified it all over the place, and we'd moved to Grafton at that point in time. And I was flying it along a beach in Woolgoolga when I was seen by members of the Water Ski Club in Grafton, who you live in country towns, you probably appreciate that here at Anacortes. Everybody knows everything you do. My wife and I were members of the Water Ski Club, and they held a Jacaranda festival every year in November, in the late spring. The Water Ski Club financed its operations to a large degree from the Water Ski Carnival that occurred in conjunction with the Jacaranda Festival, and they would put on stunts. They had pyramids of girls on water skis, they had jumps and competition and so forth. And because of my supposed expertise with flying machines, I was asked would I build a water ski kite and fly it at the next Jacaranda Festival, which was scheduled for October, November 1963. This request was made on me in January 1963. So I had about eight or so months to do this. I said, oh yeah, no problem, because I hadn't really even seen a water ski kite, but I understand they were a 5-sided device, and I built many of these and flown them in Harbour. So I proceeded to trial a model. I mean, I'm good at models, and I built the kite, and it fly all right, but the minute I hung a weight underneath it, which was supposed to represent this coward, it became unstable. And I decided this was not my scene at all. I've already spoken to my good friend over here about professional cowardice. So I was looking for something else, and Grafton had an animal there that flies a lot, and yeah, thank you. It's the Australian fruitbat. This is a big beast. It's up to 4 feet and sometimes larger. 4 feet.
Whoa.
This is a big thing. It's like that big.
Wow.
They had in the middle of the river, which is at least a half or more miles wide, they had an island called Susan Island, and there was at least 1 million of them. And at night time, they'd blacken the skies. I love them because there's not a single feather on them. And guess what? They're a simple structure. And furthermore, they can fly backwards. Pretty impressive, eh? So, you guys on that? So I actually made a wing with a main spar through there with airfoil shaped things wrapped around for about 30% of the wing. I reflexed it along, just going down here a bit further, I reflexed this section and got it flying rather nicely. But the problem is it was really a sail, like a boat. And it was going to be expensive. And the idea of this whole thing was to make one flight at the Jacaranda Festival. And this was going to cost me probably £150 in the days when a week's wages was £35, and I think we couldn't afford it. I was married with 2 children and a large mortgage, and there was no spare cash. So I had to dump the idea, and furthermore, it had a glide angle of probably 1 in 10. So if you're at 100 feet height over the boat with this, you could travel 1,000 feet inland away from the shore with no control. I was well aware of Otto Lilienthal's, under the arm weight shift system. I didn't see it as being a practical device for me at all. It was just too complicated and too difficult. Then I was to see a picture of a gliding parachute, and I believe it was brought to the clubhouse in Grafton of this wing. This is not the photograph. The one I saw was more rotated to the front, and it had this type of pod underneath it. In the last couple of years, thanks to Graham Henderson, we've found that this was a half-sized, well actually there are 2 models. I think this is probably a 56-inch keel and a model pod. And then another one was built, was a half-sized replica for the Apollo thing, half-sized pod and half-sized wing. I saw this and it was described as a gliding parachute, and to me this looked like a really good answer, because what I was really trying to do was to make a kite that would descend in a controlled manner. Even if I had no control over it, if the rope broke, it would just come down. And I couldn't imagine a device like this could do any more than 1-to-1, 45-degree angle. Okay? I thought, perfect.
And for the sake of clarity, the ski kite that is pictured in there, if the rope went slack, it would just flutter down. It didn't have any control at all. It had no stability at all.
No, this was...
So if your boat stopped and the rope broke, you'd just plummet.
Yeah, this is what I was expected to build. And exactly that, if the rope broke or the boat stopped, which they frequently did, they ran into a sandbank or whatever, you just fell out of the sky. And I didn't fancy that idea one bit. So, naturally, the idea of a parachute device draped over the top of me, I just couldn't see a jump start. As you know, stand on water ski and hit by the boat, away you go. So I obviously had to put a frame in the device, and I didn't have the benefit of any of this information at all, none whatsoever. I'd never heard of Palmer or Miller, and apart from the book that said this parachute was a NASA thing and they're planning to do recoveries with it, I had no other information. And the thing about it is, it turned out to be an advantage, because if I'd have seen that wing or the Batso, that's what I'd have built. By this time it's around